Aloha, folks. It's Antonio with HypnosisProductReviews.com. Today I've got a very special friend, Bill Ohanlon, all the way from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I've been waiting a very long time for this. How you doing, Bill?
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me, and aloha to you.
Yeah, hopefully the weather is better where you're at right now. With out on the islands, we had a downpour.
No, it's great here. It's in the 70s and 80s and sunny and quiet, so it's good.
And I've never been to New Mexico. This might be kind of a dumb question, but it's pretty void of humidity there, right?
It is. It's high desert, they call it where we are. We're 7,000 feet, so we're way above a mile, and it's super dry here. So we actually like it when we get rain, but we have 222 days of full sunshine with no rain here.
Wow.
Yeah, a little different from the island.
Yeah, just a little bit.
That's a tad.
Now, can you give my audience a brief background of how you got into change work?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing is when I was an undergraduate student, psychology student, I met Milton Erickson, and some of your audience may not be knowledgeable about Milton Erickson, but he was a psychiatrist and a psychologist and a hypnotherapist, and he was sort of, sometimes they call him the father of modern hypnosis because he developed a different approach, and we'll talk about that. But I met him in 1973 when I was an undergraduate at Arizona State and a psychology major. And I was fascinated with this guy, and I became sort of obsessed. He didn't really have any books at the time. I discovered later he had a book, but it was out of print. But he had written a bunch of articles. So I sought out those articles, and there was a book that came out that you may be aware of, and some of the people who are listening might be. It was called Uncommon Therapy by Jay Haley. Great book, if you ever get a chance to read it.
Good book.
Got some great stories in there about the magic of Erickson's hypnotic and non-hypnotic therapy. And once I read that, it was all over but the shouting for me, because I was like, how does this guy do this? Reading that book, I was both discouraged, thinking I'll never be able to do this stuff, and excited, thinking I'd love to be able to do something like what this guy does. And it took me a few years, but I worked up my courage. I was a very shy guy when I was a younger person. And I wrote him a letter in 1977 and said, could I come and work with you? I have no money. But I worked as a gardener between my undergraduate, by then I was in graduate school, and he called me back and took me on as a gardener and a student, and he mentored me. And I was a little freaked out about hypnosis. I wanted to learn his therapy, but I was a little wary of the hypnosis, as a lot of people are when they first come to it. I think they're fascinated with it and they're frightened by it. And I was in that same category. But
It's almost like a double-edged sword with hypnosis.
There's
that fascination. But when I was a kid, quick backstory, I learned about hypnosis. I think it was a medical hypnotist, Dave Elman's book at my grandma's house when I was 6. I tried hypnotizing my stuffed animals, the whole shebang. But I think for like young boys, any young guys, there's that the allure of the control aspect.
I mean, I'm sure you've heard it, but you know, the people hear you do hypnosis and they go, well, I can't be hypnotized. Do you think you could hypnotize me? Do you think you could try? You know, it's both of those. Yeah. I'm sure I can't be hypnotized because I need to be in control too much. And would you try it with me? You know, it's that double-edged sword. I agree. But once you learn about it, I think it demystifies it. It's not so frightening. It's not so mystical. And certainly that was true for me with Dr. Erickson. And what got to me and so I actually met the founders of what later became neurolinguistic programming, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, before I studied with Erickson. After I met Erickson, but before I studied with Erickson, because I figured that's the way to understand him. He didn't explain what he did very well. So I thought NLP, it wasn't called NLP in the early days, but those patterns that they were analyzing, I thought they know what he's doing. So I studied all those. And I became certified in NLP in 1977. I went to the first group of certifications. And I went to see Erickson, and they did have good chunks of what Erickson did, but not everything. And studying with them blew my mind.
They didn't get the full man. I think, didn't Erickson talk, I think there's a quote about something about the nut.
Yeah, he said, Baylor and Grinder spent 4 days with me. They thought they got my techniques in a nutshell, and what they got was the nutshell. And I think that's a little unkind because I learned so much from those guys and from NLP because they systematize things, both about psychotherapy, but about Erickson's work that I don't think he'd been able to articulate. So, I don't want to put him down, but all I'm saying is, as you said, there's more to the story. There was more to the guy. And this, it's been 40 years since I studied with him. And I am still learning more about his approach. And I once heard Jay Haley say, if I felt I understood even 50% of what Dr. Erickson was doing, I think I'd be a better therapist. And I think that's a little modest. I think I understand about 80% of what Dr. Erickson did after all these years of studying and writing a bunch of books about him. But I still don't think I have plumbed the full depths of it. Fascinating guy. That's all I can say.
Oh, incredibly. Now, you can attest to the fact that he loved practical jokes, right?
He was big on humor in general, but he loved really corny practical jokes. That's all I can say.
Okay, he would love my humor. Well, one thing we did for April Fool's joke a couple years ago, I released a rare Erickson audio. I tried to find we found somebody, Michael Perez, a hypnotist, and we had him basically trying to do an impersonation of Erickson, which is really hard to do his voice. And
it is very difficult.
Yeah,
very strange voice.
That real gravelly. So we did a audio of him talking as if he's Erickson, and he was like telling some random story about like somebody that was tying a shoelace and blah blah blah. So we released it on April Fool's Day, which I assume he would have got a laugh out of it. I got an email from Zieg. I think it's how you pronounce it.
Zag. Yeah.
I got an email from Zyg within like 6 hours of that. He's like that. He's like, that is not a rare Erickson audio. I'm like, I know. At the end, like about 10 minutes in, we're like, April Fools, ha ha ha. I don't think he made it all the way to the end. Yeah, Zyg was not too happy with that one. He's like, this is not.
He's pretty protective of that legacy, that's for sure. Well, just to give you a little insider thing, I said something that was critical of Dr. Erickson many years ago, and I got kicked out of the Erickson conferences for 19 years.
What?
19 years they wouldn't have me back because they thought I was disrespectful. And I was just being, I thought, appropriately critical of, not being a true believer and saying, he had his flaws and here were some of the flaws, and they didn't like what I said, one iota. So I got a letter from Jeff Zeig and the Erickson Foundation board saying you'll never teach for us again. But somehow they relented after about 20 years. So I still perform now.
So I'm not the lucky one that's been branded an outlaw.
You're not alone in your getting a sharp response back. Let's say that.
No, one thing I want to do is actually see if I have these books here. This is actually the first time we've really talked. I think I shot you a message the other day. I think the first time I heard about you was from this bad boy, A Guide to Transland, which I think a lot of hypnotists don't know about this. This is a gold mine.
Thank you.
Very nice. It basically, how people talk about that thing called trance logic?
Yes. Completely
different. This, in my opinion, is a good roadmap, if you want, to trance logic.
Thank you. I had done an earlier book. I think I saw it there, Guide to Possibility Land, with a co-author, and she had studied how people learn. She'd studied instructional design. She got a master's degree in it. She said, if you put a little picture, a little illustration next to the point you want to make, people remember it like twice as much. And I said, really? That's what the research says? So we decided for that earlier book and then for this one, just to break things into really small pieces, like bite-sized pieces with a little random picture. And I'm telling you, you talk about the human mind. People have written me or called me or come up to me when I've spoken and said, I know why you put that picture in that one. It was totally random, guaranteed totally random, but they make meaning out of it. It's very interesting to see. But yeah, that's a fun book. It's a fun book.
Let's see if I what goes. Okay, okay, I'm looking at this one from A Guide to Possibility Land. I see you've got it's basically about, it says 51 methods for doing brief respectful therapy under specify achievable goals. There's no way you could come up with a story of why you use a dinosaur.
I guarantee people do. I guarantee you, Antonio.
But you know what? You know what you could. You know how he's got his little mouth there, like he's chomping.
He's gonna eat those words.
Yeah, eating it one bite at a time. How do you eat an elephant?
It's brief. It's brief eating. I like it.
Brief eating.
I like that. But people do come up with those. But those, there's a series of books. Another one's called A Guide to Inclusive Therapy. I've written 35 books, but those three are pretty fun because they're such bite-sized ones. Then I have a couple of others on hypnosis, solution-oriented hypnosis, which is transcripts of a 3-day workshop I did on Ericksonian solution-oriented approach. I called my version. Yeah, that's it. And I called my version of Erickson's hypnotic approach. I took it a little slightly different direction. I called it solution oriented. And this was the mind-blowing thing for me, Antonio. I had learned, and I think almost everybody who's listening to this, including you, believes that hypnosis is about suggestion. And after a few years of learning hypnosis from Erickson, or hypnotherapy, how to change people with hypnosis, I changed my mind about that. And I've decided, this is a little controversial, and I don't want to argue with anybody, but just for me, it was a revolutionary way to think about it, that hypnosis isn't about suggestion primarily. I think people are just as suggestible out of trance as in trance. But hypnosis is about evocation. And I can talk a little about what I mean by that, but I think that how Erickson did his hypnosis was a little different from the traditional giving suggestions or positive affirmations or de-installing negative beliefs and reinstalling positive beliefs. I think he was up to something different. And it took me a while to get that, but once I did, it was a revolution. And I created my own kind of therapy, separate from the hypnotherapy, called the solution-oriented approach to change, based on that insight of evoking the, Steve Langton was another student of Erickson's and an NLP guy, wrote a book called The Answer Within. And I think Erickson believed we have answers in the non-conscious parts of ourselves. And that was another revolution that he did. Freud said your unconscious is scary and it's where all the monsters lurk and the evil and the bad stuff, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde stuff, that really angry.
The real scary stuff.
The scary stuff. And yeah, I think there's a place for that stuff. And Erickson said, I think the unconscious also has a bunch of resources and skills and knowledge and abilities. And so he really spoke about a positive and creative unconscious, which is, I think, what we're tapping into a lot when we do hypnosis.
I love that. Recently, I've been thinking a lot, and we'll get into this. I've been thinking about self-hypnosis. I've never liked self-hypnosis when with suggestotherapy. Close my eyes and try to suggest, because especially with self-hypnosis, there's you still have your conscious mind, in my opinion.
That's running the show, yeah.
And if you say, you know what, in every day and every way, and that other part's like, it starts chiming in like, no, you don't.
Yeah, that's right.
What you brought up about the about the evocation of actually evoking change, I really love that. So that was one thing I was actually excited. I've been making notes. I'll get into this in a minute, but I've been thinking of if I were to create like a solution-oriented or solution-focused trance, what would it consist of?
First of all, a lot more permission than directiveness. So you could find a way to go into trance in your own way, at your own rate, and your own pace. You could go only as deeply as you need to go. See my t-shirt here? Yeah, you don't need to go any deeper than you need to go. So there's a lot of permission in it, as opposed to what I first learned when I learned hypnosis, which was you will go into trance, you will relax. There's a lot of telling people what they will do. And that evokes, I think, a little resistance, because some people go, oh yeah, make me. And other people just instantly relax. And that's not exactly what we're going for. We're going for evoking their abilities. And so first thing is permission. You give them a lot of choices. You go into trance with your eyes open, your eyes closed. You go into a light trance, a medium trance, a deep trance. But all of it presumes that they're going to go into trance. And later, when you get into the hypnotherapy part, presumes that they're going to change. So I really don't know how you're going to change. I love that about Erickson. He trusted the person's creative unconscious and assumed that they have answers. And if he got them into that place that we know is trance, he would invite them to solve their own problems. Now, it's not that he would never give suggestions, because he was sort of a transitional figure. Sometimes he directed, sometimes he didn't. I've taken it a little further in being much more evocational. And so one of the first things I do, and this starts to move into the self-hypnosis, is I invite people to remember a time when they were naturally in trance. Like, you kayak maybe, and when you're out kayaking and you're just lost in the moment, in that flow, that's sort of a trance. And so I'd say, if I were working with you, I'd say, Antonio, remember a time when you were just in nature and you were in the flow and time just disappeared? That's a little like the trance that I'm going to invite you into. And then I'd say, have you ever been so focused on some task you're doing that you totally forgot time and what was happening? That's a kind of a trance. Have you been in a conversation with a friend where you're really into it and all of a sudden you look up and they're closing the restaurant that you were sitting in and you didn't recognize it? And that's a trance. And so I evoke, rather than tell you go into trance, I say, remember those, evoke those, and then build your own trance. And so I do a similar thing with self-hypnosis.
You remind me about talking about getting so lost in the conversation. I dropped some friends off the airport yesterday. I hadn't seen them in like 4 years, dropped them off. And I called my girlfriend and she's like, April guys, they missed their airplane. I'm like, what happened? I dropped them off like 2 hours before. They're sitting there having a cocktail. Apparently they were talking to somebody really interesting at the bar. They're talking. They did not hear them calling their name over the PA.
Yep.
They got to the gate right when they closed the gate. I was like, well, that's what happens.
Yeah, you go into your own trances and you lose track of time. And so, when you're talking about self-hypnosis, I have the same thing. It's like when you do self-hypnosis, you're acting like the driver in the car as well as sitting in the back seat. And your conscious mind is getting in there, as you said, sometimes with those negative beliefs, those unhelpful beliefs, and it's going to run the show. And I say, no, let yourself go into trance. So before I do self-hypnosis, I hypnotize the person a couple of times, and then I say, I want you to memorize the pathway there. So for me, when I go into self-hypnosis, I've been in trance so many times, I get a hand levitation. And so when I do self-hypnosis, I don't tell myself anything. I close my eyes. I breathe a little differently. And then I allow myself to go. I don't make myself go into trance. That's what you were talking about. It's the conscious mind saying, go into trance. You will go into. No, I just allow myself to go into trance. And how I know it's happening, first my hands start to feel that glove anesthesia and a little numb. And then I notice it's usually my right hand starts to lift. And that's how I go into self-hypnosis. So when I'm working with people and they say, can you teach me self-hypnosis? I say, yeah, go into trance a few times and we'll find your pathway into trance. Not my idea of how I want you to do self-hypnosis, but your pathway. So for them, they might close their eyes and start to see washes of color, purple typically people report, or green, they often report to me. Or they find their breathing changes, or they find that they relax that muscle right up here. And if they notice that, then I say, okay, next time you want to go into trance, just allow that to happen and then go wherever you're going. Because you know what you intend to do when you're in trance. You don't have to talk to yourself. You don't have to give yourself any suggestions. Just go to that place with the intention, I want to sleep better, or I want to stop smoking, or whatever it is you're working on. You already know what the intention is. Why do you have to tell yourself?
That's interesting. Have you ever heard of I'm having a brain fart. John Overdurf.
Oh yeah.
Overdurf. I don't know if I heard an audio, or I think maybe one of his students told me how he always tells people to do self-hypnosis is basically like a statement, like it's kind of permissive. It's sometimes when I start to think about this stuff, I kind of trance out. I think it's something in what ways will you allow me to blah, 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 that will allow me to be completely amazed.
Oh, that's great. That's cool.
And I've used that. I used that last year. So I used to drink a lot of Monsters, and I used to drink a lot of alcohol, and I was getting kidney stones. So I just did, you know what? The other thing I think helped me big time with this is I went in not like this is going to happen. I went in with like, let's have an experiment. What's going to happen?
I love that. It's more of an uncertainty and an openness to it, and also a little more of a presupposition. What I loved about that overturf thing is this is one of the things I learned from Erickson. I'll tell you a quick story. Erickson once, one of the most perplexing stories I ever heard from him was one time he had a student who was a psychiatrist, and Erickson was in San Francisco, and this psychiatrist who was worked with teenagers, worked with adolescents a lot, said, Dr. Erickson, you're coming to San Francisco to do a workshop. I wonder if you'd see one of my patients as a demonstration subject because I'm having a really difficult time. He's a really oppositional kid. He won't do anything anybody asks him to do, and he's getting in a lot of trouble. And at school and outside of school and with his parents and everything. So Erickson says, yeah, bring him along to the conference. So they bring him along to the conference. This guy walks him up there. His name's Franz Baumann. Walks this adolescent up there. The kid knows he's there for a demonstration for hypnosis. And Erickson, he sits in front of a chair, and he figures Erickson's going to do all this. You will go into trance stuff. And Erickson just looks at him and says, I really don't know how you're going to change your behavior. And then looks at him for a few minutes. The kid goes into a little mini trance, and then Erickson says, thank you for coming. And Franz Baumann is thinking, well, I guess he assessed the guy, decided he wasn't hypnotizable. In the weeks after that demonstration, the kid made all sorts of changes. And what I love about that example you gave from John Overturf is that there's a presupposition in that. So one of the things I learned from Dr. Erickson was presuppose change. I don't know how quickly you'll go into trance. You had a sign like that when we first started talking. Yeah. I don't know how quickly you'll go into trance. I don't know how deeply you'll go into trance. I don't know how quickly you'll change. I don't know exactly in what ways you'll change. All that presupposes that change will happen, that trance will happen. And that's one of the things. I once saw Erickson hypnotize someone without saying go into trance. He said, I don't know how quickly you're going to trance tonight, but please don't go in too quickly. And the woman starts to go into trance. And I thought, wait a minute, where was the induction? Well, he was presupposing she went into trance, and she was responding to that. That kid who was sitting up there was responding to his presupposition. And another one of those amazing Erickson stories was one time he called for a demonstration at a workshop, and he said, would someone like to come up and experience trance? Someone raises their hand. He has them come up there. The person sits in a chair, and Erickson just looks at him. And the person goes into trance. And later, after the demonstration, and then he does some other stuff. After the demonstration, people in the audience, well, how did you hypnotize him? Was it psychic hypnosis? And he said, no. He said, I defined the situation as he was going to go into trance. I didn't say anything, so he went into trance. I created the expectation of trance. And it's that expectation and presupposition that's part of this evocative approach that I was talking about that doesn't have to use suggestion, but uses the context to evoke trance or change, depending on what you're working on.
It's almost like anytime I've done hypnosis, which I love doing, the idea of having two chairs. You want to sit in the trance chair or the hypnosis chair.
Yeah, that's great.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, that's a perfect one. Both the splitting of it, and I've talked about that in some of my work, but also the presupposition, because and one of Erickson's co-authors called that the illusion of alternatives. That either it's like you say to your kid, if you have your parent, you can have a bedtime story or watch 15 more minutes of television before you go to bed. You're not giving them the choice of staying up all night.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, but both of those assume that they're going to go to bed. And so I think what you're saying in the hypnosis chair and the trance chair, that has another element in it. But I love that because it presupposes either way it's a win-win in terms of going into trance. And so I use that same stuff when I do self-hypnosis and when I do change work with trance. I say, are you going to change quickly? Are you going to change slowly? Are you going to change in a way that really surprises me Or are you going to change in a way that really surprises both of us? Or are you going to change in a way that, looking back on it later, you'll realize you were always going to change in that way? All these presuppositions that then give that person the freedom to find a way. One time Erickson told me, I was working with these people and I couldn't get change any other way. And I had them imagine that they were visiting my office a year after we'd finished their hypnotherapy work.
I love this
and
story.
That they were telling me what changes they'd made in the year, and then what I said to them and what we did in my office that really helped them. And he said, then I'd say, go deeply into trance and forget you just told me that, once they tell him how he helped them change. And then they'd come out and he would do the very either trance or non-trance work that they told him he'd do. And he's basically, that was what excited me about this approach of evocation. He believed that everybody had some sort of blueprint for change within themselves. And if you could evoke that, they would change a lot more quickly and it would last a lot longer because you would bypass the resistance. If you're telling them what to do, it could fail. If they know what to do already because it's evoked from inside, well, and you live on the islands. One of the things that's troublesome, and what Hawaii does, is make sure that things don't get taken in from the outside because they can screw up the whole ecology of the island. You know, new animals or new plants, it can wreck things. And so I think the same thing about psychotherapy. Be careful of introducing your ideas into the client's ecosystem because it can take over like a weed sometimes in an unhelpful way. And so that was the revolution for me of Erickson. And that's the revolution of self-hypnosis. Don't try and suggest yourself into trance. Don't try and push yourself into trance like you were saying with your conscious mind. But go into trance a few times, memorize the pathway, and then allow trance to happen and allow the changes to happen by setting an intention right before you go in.
Now, one thing recently I've been kind of toying around with is creating, I guess, like a solution-oriented trance. There's been times when I've been in trance and I'll ask myself questions such as, what was the question I asked myself the other day? Oh man, I'm having a brain fart. I wish I had that note in front of me. It was a question of, I think it was along the lines of, if I was in a solution-oriented trance, what would it look like? Or no, I think it was, what would a solution-oriented trance look like to me?
That's great.
First thing that popped up is I haven't played video games in a long time. I actually started playing some old school Zelda Nintendo games, and the thing I liked about the Zelda games is, as opposed to like the original video games, is everything was a set path. Zelda was like an open world. You could do whatever you wanted. So I asked myself, I'm like, for me, I'm like, what would a solution-oriented like self-hypnosis trance what would it look like, feel like? I just got an instant thing of Zelda, so it's more permissive and just it's the whole exploration.
I like that. The Legend of Zelda trance. And what I love about that is it calls on your personal history. You had experience with other kinds of video games and Legend of Zelda video game, and that openness was the analogy you thought of. So you evoke that from within yourself, and that is the essence of the solution-oriented, to me, the Ericksonian approach in terms of evocation rather than suggestion. If you told yourself, now do this, it's your conscious mind running things. And then you lose the benefit of the creative unconscious that comes up with that. I couldn't have thought of that in a million years, but because it's part of your background, you thought of it. And that's the delight for me when I work with clients. It's like they come up with things that are amazing to me, that as clever as I might be in any particular day, I never would have come up with it, and it's perfect for them. And so that's the essence of it. Learn, draw upon your resources, memories, experiences, and then if you don't have any of those that are coming up for you, imagine the future. That's that future-oriented approach that we just talked about. When you come out of trance, how will it have felt? What will you have gone through? And maybe imagine someone else saying, gosh, you really changed. How did you make that change? Talking about somebody, you used to do all these monster drinks, and now you don't do them anymore. How did you get there? So I have people go into trance and say, imagine a future in which you're having a conversation with a friend saying, hey, didn't you used to drink Monster drinks all the time? You go, yeah, I used to. But you do that in the present, and it pulls you into that future. You don't have to know how you're going to get there. All you have to do is connect powerfully and emotionally and experientially to a future without Monster drinks in it, or with fewer.
Yeah, the other thing that came up when I was kind of playing around with what a future or a solution-oriented trance would look like, the whole thing of Zelda, I think for me, and I guess a lot of other people that have fallen in love with that kind of game, is there's a possibility, there's so many endless possibilities, freedom. You have freedom to do anything. You walk anywhere, and curiosity. I think that combination, especially for me, is super powerful.
That, you've just given one of the best definitions I've ever heard of solution-oriented work and solution-oriented trance. Those three elements are really powerful: the possibility and the freedom, and that sense that you have. I love that. I think that's a really great definition of it. And again, that's all covered for me with evocation and trusting that person. The other thing is, I used to use the word subconscious. Sorry, I got a phone ringing in the background. Subconscious and unconscious. These days I use the word non-conscious. And I just mean anything that's not your conscious mind. It could be your body, it could be your physiology, it could be your neurology, it could be spirituality if you have a spiritual sense. Something that's beyond your conscious mind, whatever that is, I call all that non-conscious. And I've come over the 40-some years that I've been doing this work is to trust people's non-conscious minds, that there is a creative and healing non-conscious rather than that scary, Mr. Hyde non-conscious that Freud scared us all with.
Okay. What was I going to say? Do you have any particular product? I haven't seen any product. Do you have any particular product that's aimed at self-hypnosis?
I have a few products that used to be sold by Crown House. I don't know if they're still out there because the guy who ran the American Crown House publishers. So if you look at Crown House publishers, they probably have 4 of my self-hypnosis tapes. One of them is called Beside Yourself with Comfort, Pain Control. And one of them's, 2 of them are about healing from sexual abuse. It's called...
those I've seen those on Amazon, I think.
Oh, I think maybe they're on Amazon. I think they're all on Amazon. And then another one called Calm Beneath the Waves, which is about dealing with anxiety and panic. And so those are out there, and those are the only ones. I have to tell you that Erickson and I also have a little bit of a bias to this because each trance is different for me. When I have a person come in, it's totally different from the last trance that I did. So there aren't scripts in this. I'm a little reluctant to do those kind of tapes, but people ask me for them a lot. And so but I have a course I do every year. You and I were just talking about this before we came on here. I only do it once a year, and it's already over for 2017, sorry. Or we're in the middle of it, so the registration closed a couple months ago. In 2018, I'll do that course again, and it has within it trances for insomnia, trances for all that stuff I talked about. All those tapes that I just talked about are in their audios. And then trances for depression, trances for sleep apnea, trances for overeating and, weight loss and stuff like that. So I put a bunch of those in there, and you can just download them and give them to your clients and patients if you want. So that course happens once a year, and I train people in the methods of solution-oriented hypnosis or Ericksonian hypnosis. I use those terms kind of interchangeably. But if they go to the newhypnosis.com, they can get a free download about how hypnosis doesn't have anything to do with suggestion, my radical idea. And then they'll get on the mailing list to find out about the course next year if they want to take it.
Yeah, so I was saying, if you go below this video or above, depends on the orientation.
Where you put it, yeah.
I have a link to his to that website. God, that. So when are you going to be doing it next year? Is it always the same time every year?
No, I used to do 3 courses a year, and I think I'm dropping down to 2. I'm starting a new career as a songwriter, actually. So I'm reducing
hence the guitars.
Yeah, that's right. This is my studio, and the stuff on the wall are dampening things when I record. So I've doing a little less teaching. I used to travel 3 or 4 times a month all around the world. I taught the first workshops about Ericksonian approaches in Finland. Now they have 3,000 people in a solution-oriented organization. It really took off there. And so I traveled all around the world. I got tired of traveling. My fiance, who's also a therapist, jokingly diagnosed me with post-travel stress disorder because I went millions of miles around the world. And I decided to put all my work online, work a little less, stay home. And you live in a beautiful place. I live in a beautiful place. I want to stay home more. So about once a year, and I don't know, I think I'll probably do that one in February next year.
I might have to see if I can make it out there. Or what you could do, you could do a workshop.
Those are online. It's only
okay. Okay, good. What you could do is you could do a workshop here on Kauai.
I do love Kauai, but I don't love to travel. But I'll think about it. I only love to go to beautiful places and tropical places. So we'll keep in touch about that. We'll
have to work that out. Now, I'm trying to see if I have any other questions. What are some is there any specific way that you teach self-hypnosis to somebody?
Yeah, the only other technique that I use is one I learned from Dr. Erickson's wife, Betty Erickson, Mrs. Elizabeth Erickson.
I love this one.
And she did this really interesting approach, which I've used and I've taught other people when they say, no, I get what you're saying, just evoke, but I want a more formal technique. This is a technique that works pretty well. And that is, she would look around the room and see 5 things she could focus on visually. So I'm in my studio, so I see a little light on my studio monitor. I see some headphones right here. I see a cup that I have right here. Just focus on those for a few seconds each, and then focus on 4 things you can hear. I'm listening around my room and in my environment and to you because there's a little noise coming from your side. And then 5 things, there's 5 things, then 5 things that you can touch in your environment. My hand is on my thigh. I have my legs crossed. My feet are in my shoes. I can feel my watch on my wrist. And then you go down 4 things. 4 things I can see, 4 things I can hear, 4 things I can touch, or the tactile stuff, and 3 things. By the time you get to 2, you're so focused that you're often in trance. So I think there are 4 doorways into trance. You can use any of these doorways to do self-hypnosis. The first doorway is just what we're talking about, focus attention. So a lot of hypnosis, like raise your eyes up and focus on this point on the wall. That's a focusing technique for hypnosis or self-hypnosis. So you can use that yourself. The second one is defocusing. Just unfocus your eyes, unfocus your mind, and space out. So that's the second doorway into altered states or trance. The third doorway, we've talked about this before the camera came on or before we start recording, is dissociation. That is splitting your awareness or experience in some ways. So your head up stays out of trance, your body goes into trance. Or your left side goes into trance and your right side doesn't. It's very weird to do dissociation. I've done a lot of playing around with that with my clients. So dissociation. So when people doodle, when they're talking on the phone, that's a dissociation. So people knit sometimes when they're listening to a lecture. That's a dissociation. When you're doing something but you're not putting your conscious attention on it, that's a kind of dissociation. So that's the third doorway into trance or altered states. The fourth doorway is rhythm. If you ever go to ceremonies, I've been to like shaman ceremonies, and they start with the drums.
Yeah, powwows, yeah.
Powwows. I go into trance, you see those sometimes in Hawaiian resorts. They have these Polynesian drums that they do, and they have native drums. And if you listen to that stuff and get into it, you often go into a trance. It's trance-inducing. It's mesmerizing in certain ways, but other kinds of rhythm. You can rock. You can do rhythmic breathing, which is often how people do meditation or relaxation things. So the 4 doorways: focus, defocus, dissociation, and rhythm. And if you can combine all those with your self-hypnosis, you're in like flame.
One thing I thought about, I don't know if you ever heard about Igor. You've heard of Igor Ledachovsky, right?
Yeah.
He does they hooked me up with a they call it Beyond Self Hypnosis. It's kind of an interesting approach. It's a huge DVD set, but it's about it's big on mindfulness. The first part of it teaches like the whole of being able to keep yourself mentally grounded with mindfulness.
Sure.
And they talk about doing visualizations when your eyes are closed, as you do in certain exercises, like pantomiming something. Which he said that in everyday life, when we talk to people, we don't just tell them a description. We show it.
Yeah.
We pantomime it.
This massive. Yeah, we do that a lot. Yeah.
And there's one exercise, which I don't think you'd be worried if I actually said this, that he has you. Let's say if this is a picture of like a some naturescape, he has you looking. Basically, the whole seminar room, he had everybody looking at it and describe it. Describe what it looked like. Then you have you close your eyes, visualize it for a couple minutes, open your eyes, and then you have you describe it metaphorically.
That's
like
nice.
This looks like this, blah 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 blah. Close your eyes, visualize, and then you have you open your eyes, describe like the theme of it, the theme, the kind of feel of it. Close your eyes, visualize. I did that at one point where it felt very psychedelic, for lack of better words, where there was a tree, and at one point I closed my eyes, and he always talks about like a symbolic gift. If your unconscious presents you something, just take it. There was I saw like a golden Buddha come up. I grabbed it, and then the next thing I know, there's a tree, and this felt clear as a very, very, like very real. It felt like the tree grabbed me and pulled me across, almost like a Disney movie. So at that point, I finally understood what people meant by the unconscious doesn't know the difference between real versus imagined.
Yeah.
So actually, the question: how do you think you could incorporate something like that into self-hypnosis? I know, for example, I said that I like Zelda, so if I had a picture of like, let's say like some kind of theme.
Well, again, anything that calls you internally to focus in some ways does it. So, what I would probably have you do if I were working with you is I'd have you remember a Zelda game that you went through that you particularly enjoyed, and just follow that path that you went through that time, and maybe make different choices this time. But as much as you could, remember the visual details, the auditory, the sounds of Zelda. I would have you remember as much as you could, and that you would be entranced within minutes, I suspect, if you did that really intensely.
Man, I'm such a nerd for this stuff.
It's fun. I've been doing this, Antonio, for over 40 years. I haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet. I still learn stuff, and I love it. Like you said, I'm a nerd for it too. I love this stuff. You've sought out training and contact with people all over the world who are doing this stuff. I think it's endlessly fascinating. People are endlessly fascinating, number one, and there's so much to learn in this. There have been hundreds of years of hypnosis stuff, and we're still learning cool new things. And, I love that you have a passion for it. I have a passion for it. I thought, well, after a few years, I'll learn everything. No way. 40-some years, I'm still learning new stuff. I love it.
Well, there's so much stuff to learn.
There is. And human beings are endlessly fascinating, but also hypnosis. I think it teaches, a lot of really famous therapists, psychotherapists, Freud, the guy who started behavioral therapy, those people learned hypnosis early in their careers, and then they moved away from it for one reason or another. The guy who started Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls, they all learned hypnosis. There's something that learning hypnosis and working with people hypnotically teaches you about human psychology, how people change, how people stay stuck, and how changeable people are. And that's one of the things that's made me an optimistic therapist, because you do hypnosis and you get people to change their perceptions and their experience pretty quickly. You believe people can change. And I think some traditional therapists think, oh, it's really hard to change. People are so screwed up from their childhood traumas, they'll never change. I became a psychotically optimistic therapist when I learned hypnosis, and that's never gone away. I really love this stuff, like you say. I'm a nerd for it. And partly why I'm a nerd for it is because I've seen people change in powerful ways, and there's still more to learn. It's cool.
Oh, so I love this stuff. So one thing I want to say is grab some of his books. This one
That's
Me
my
too.
bestseller. I was on Oprah with that one.
Hey, I did not know that. I found out afterwards. I was watching your video the other day, the 6 strategies for depression, which
Oh
I
yeah.
think I got about halfway through. I got to watch it again. Where I used to have very, very bad depression, got suicidal. This is what 15, 16 years ago. And I think self-hypnosis and a lot of different things help. On top of doing medicine, that also, like, everything kind of
Yeah.
worked hand in hand. If you want to know about using a solution-oriented trance for personal development, get your hands on this book.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Very, very good book.
Thank you. Well, I was on Oprah, and now I've been on Antonio Perez. It's a step up as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. Well, I'm not sure how big the audience is.
That's all right. We had a great time, so that's okay with me. I had a much better time than I had on Oprah, but I'll probably sell fewer books. I will say that.
Yeah, you might sell a couple books here and there.
That's all right. That's okay. I have enough money. That's okay. I really appreciate your interest in talking to me. We've been connected a little on social media, and it's really nice to meet you in face to face, even though not in the same state. But
yeah. Well, it depends what you mean by states.
That's right. We're both in altered states, but different altered states. There you go.
Hey, folks. So give them some love. Go below the link to it's the new hypnosis, right?
Newhypnosis.com or billohanlon.com is my general site. It's BILLOHANLON. Yeah.
And if you are into the solution-oriented hypnosis, you got this book.
That's a good one.
And
those are all published by Norton, and the other one, Do One Thing Different, is published by HarperCollins. So
I'm gonna have
5 books. If you're interested, just go on Amazon. You'll find them all.
I'm gonna have to eventually get a bookshelf just for your books.
Oh, that's great. I'd be so honored. And if I come over to Kauai, I'll sign them for you.
Okay. So everybody, below the video or above, depends on where it is. Click the link, check the stuff out, and jump on my newsletter. You'll see below. You can put your name, your email. You'll get instant access to a guide on how you can sell more of your hypnosis products online in your trainings.
Cool. Well, I thank you deeply and more deeply, Antonio.
Very deeply. Actually, I've been going into a trance. I don't know if you've noticed. I kind of zoned out a couple times here and there.
You did. I noticed you were in and out. That's good. It's fun, isn't it?
I love doing this stuff, and it was great connecting with you. I will talk to you soon. Aloha.
Thank you. Thanks very much. All right.
Okay, so